As you may know, Goldberg and I often discuss how the liberal media affects what's going on in this country, and we just did that with Brit Hume. But Democrat Robert Kennedy Jr. sees it much differently, saying conservatives dominate the media landscape.
The right-wing control of the American media, particularly starting with Fox News, but 95% of talk radio in our country is right-wing. And so you have a whole sections of our country that's what they're hearing. And I think it's divided our country in a way that we haven't been divided probably since the Civil War.
Joining us now from Miami is the purveyor, BernardGoldberg.com, Mr. Goldberg. So, does RFK have a point?
No. The idea that right-wingers control the American media, it's downright funny, because if right-wingers really do control the American media, they're doing a terrible job. Has Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ever read Time or Newsweek? Has he ever read the New York Times or the LA Times? Has he ever watched NPR or NBC or the other networks? Except for Fox and talk radio, we live in an overwhelmingly liberal media culture. And Brit Hume's point just a few minutes ago about how the media is covering this economic crisis is a good example. I mean, they're covering it as if taxes is the big issue, where spending is overwhelmingly the big issue. And I wonder, does Robert Kennedy Jr., I mean, does he and other liberals, do they really want all of the media, not just 90 or 95% of the media? Do they really want all of the media to reflect their views?
Here's what I think. Here's what I think's going on. I think that RFK Jr. and people in his set, all right, they believe that NPR, PBS, CNN, MSNBC, they're mainstream. They're not.
Yes, exactly.
They're not left.
Exactly.
They're just like the New York Times. Oh, how can you say that? That's a mainstream paper. That's not left. All right.
That's
so
absolutely
therefore,
correct.
they don't have any baseline to say,
hey, Bill,
well, this is the left-wing media, because they don't think it's left-wing.
I wrote about this in Bias, and this was like 11 years ago. I said that these people see everything to the left of center as middle of the road, as moderate, as reasonable,
regular folks,
and everything to the right of center as conservative. You know, but everything to the left of center is just middle of the road. So you're right. You're absolutely right.
I remember a conversation I had with Dan Rather one time. It was off the air, and I said to him, you know, I used to work with you, and when I came over from WCBS, the local station here in New York, which wasn't partisan. I mean, we were just run and gun covering the news in New York City. It was,
right.
You know. And I walked into your culture. I was just surrounded by left-wing guys, including you. And he denied it. He denied it. He goes, we don't have a lot of left-wing guys here. And I'm going, is Rod Serling here? Where? I mean...
Bill, you're telling this to me?
I'm telling it to the audience through you. You're like the medium.
I think everybody watching us knows that I've had my disagreements with my close personal friend Dan Rather on this. But you're right.
I'm right. He doesn't acknowledge it.
No, he doesn't. We had well, I don't want to get into it. But the point is, he doesn't see the newspapers or the media.
It would be, you know what? It would be like Father Damien going to the leper colony and Molokai and saying, "There's no leprosy here. People just have the measles."
That's right. That's right. I mean, he doesn't see things that are clearly liberal as liberal.
No.
But this is the fundamental reason that journalists deny that there's bias, because they think everything to the left of center is middle of the road. Once you accept that, once you understand that, you understand all of their craziness. And I think we hit on that. Now,
Bernie, before we went on the air, wished me a Merry Christmas 2 weeks early, but I appreciated it. But we are pretty much the only ones covering the so-called war on Christmas, you know, the Rhode Island stuff and all, like Charlie Brown getting thrown under the bus in Arkansas. You don't see these stories on any of the morning programs, Good Morning America, the Today Show, Nightly News. Why don't you see them? Because, you know, they're pretty interesting stories one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. One way or the other, they're interesting stories. Now, I'll get to it in 10 seconds. But first, let me say, I don't observe Christmas, but I have no problem with people saying Merry Christmas. I do think if a business, I'm a capitalist, so I think if a business wants to tell its employees to say happy holidays, that's none of my business. I don't have a problem with that. And I do think that while I don't believe that the baby Jesus in a public square is going to bring down the republic, I think there are legitimate constitutional issues. Okay. But from a strictly journalistic point of view, it's interesting when the governor of a state in this country calls it a holiday tree, which, come on, that's just silly, and won't call it a Christmas tree. Now, 11 months ago, the New York Times did a story on this, but you're right. You don't see this. You don't see this in the mainstream media on anything resembling a regular basis at this time of year. And no matter what side you fall on this issue, it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting when a governor won't.
And there's plenty of ads for Christmas stuff in these newspapers. I know they know it's Christmas time.
But every poll shows that journalists as a group are not a religious people. They don't go to church on a regular basis or synagogue.
Yeah.
And I think they just don't see it as nearly as important as somebody like you sees it.
I think they're afraid of the issue. Bernie Goldberg, everybody. Plenty more ahead as the factor moves along this evening.